Okay, why don't we get started? Just wanted to say welcome to everyone. I'm just fixing the camera here. For those of you who are patching in, I saw that we have registrants from around the world. So good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to the monthly YANA webinar on best practices and other innovations in social impact. Today, our topic is solving the mystery of corporate funding. We have two excellent experts with us, Vivian Hexter from Aviva Strategic Advising and Cheryl Green Rosario from CGR Consulting. Vivian has written books. She's been doing consulting, foundation advising, nonprofit advising for many years. So we're delighted she's going to come help us unwrap the mysteries of corporate funding. And Cheryl Green Rosario has done diversity, equity, inclusion, consulting to businesses, foundations, philanthropies, community organizations, et cetera. So we're excited to have both of them online with us. Before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge, obviously, all the stuff that's going on in our country. And there's stuff that goes on all the time, and sometimes it bubbles up. So this is not meant to be in place of the serious issues going on, but we want to kind of stick to our normal schedule and continue to provide resources and best practices for our members and community members. So we will have lots of space and time to talk about many things, but this is one day we wanted to just share an hour on some important fundraising matters that affect a lot of nonprofits. So with that, I will turn it over. Let me just unmute Vivian and Cheryl. Welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Cheryl.
Hi.
Okay, and I will put myself on mute, and just to let everyone know, logistics-wise, we are recording this, and I will be monitoring the Q&A and the chat functions. So if you have questions throughout, you may put them in there. If I find something that is particularly relevant to a question at hand, I can interrupt the speakers. Otherwise, we'll save plenty of time at the end to take your questions, and I think we should have a wonderful discussion. So without further ado.
Great. Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you everyone for joining. Vivian and I are so pleased to be with you all today, and I echo Rachel's word. We know that there are many things happening in our world today, and our hearts and minds are with everyone impacted. These are certainly unprecedented times, and I congratulate many of you that are probably already through your work working on a lot of social justice issues, or maybe helping from a health standpoint in regards to the pandemic. And Vivian and I certainly through our work continue to do what we can. And so whether today during this presentation when we get to the Q&A, or at any time, if you have issues, we both are working on diversity, inclusion, and equity issues, and so happy to answer questions at any point. So let's get started. We're excited to do this. So here are our pictures. So I'm sure you all saw those in the bios, but again, pleased to be with you today. All right. So we just wanted to set the stage before we jump in and tell you a little bit about what you will learn today. And I know some of this was in the original invite, but just so we're all on the same page. First, navigating the complexities of corporations. You probably noted the name, Solving the Mystery of Corporate Funding. I know corporations are sometimes these large institutions, and it's hard to figure out who do I send the proposal to, who do I contact. So we're hoping to break down a little bit of that for you. Identifying the right corporate prospects, building a partnership over time. I think this is such a key piece, and hopefully you can take, if nothing else, that out of this presentation. It does take time, and building those partnerships are so important. Engaging corporate employees in potential board opportunities or other ways of volunteering, and we'll dig deeper in that space. And then I'm sure many of you have written winning proposals, but we hope to guide you even further. And after this, you'll have many winning proposals when submitting them to corporations. So we're going to jump right into the first piece, navigating the complexities of corporations. All right, so first, why do companies give? First, to fulfill social responsibility. You probably have seen many times the lines, you know, we give in places where we live and work. So it is sort of that baseline thing that most companies do feel like it's important and it's the right thing to do. Certainly to enhance their visibility and enhance reputation. More and more consumers are spending their dollars with corporations for their goods and services with those that do good. And so that's becoming even more important. To increase sales and profitability. And that really ties to actually the last point here of creating shared value. I think, you know, companies used to shy away from talking about that they're doing good to also impact the bottom line. But the truth is you can do both. I was in China in 2017 and spoke in 5 different cities there just on that topic of shared value, that you can do good, a company can do good, while still helping the bottom line. So to accelerate growth and to achieve human resource management goals. You know, there's often the top list for women to work, or top list, you know, for diversity. And companies often use their giving to be able to get on these lists. Maybe they're filling specific diversity goals, not only with staff, but in the types of things that they support or fund for women. So their human resource management goals are also an important piece. And how do they give? So of course there's cash grants and contributions, and often these contributions may come from some kind of giving platform that they have set up for their employees to give. That can be, you know, one time a year or throughout the year, and we'll get into a little bit more of that in the presentation. In-kind contributions. You may have a company, let's say they produce a lot of food, so they may give lots of cans of soup to your organization. Or if it's an electronic company, maybe they'll donate computers. We're seeing a lot of donations of laptops right now, or tablets during the pandemic, to schools that don't have them, or to organizations who are working with young people. Employees' time and pro bono services. So again, whether it's through volunteering, or they may utilize some of their departments, like their finance department, to help with accounting services, maybe their HR department to help you with some HR issues or board issues you may be having with your organizations. It could also be a legal support. So pro bono it's very important, and it's a great way to start that relationship, even if they're not giving you dollars. Promotion and publicity. You know, I used to fund the arts for 10 years, and it was a great way to get American Express's name on various theater performances, or maybe an exhibition that was happening at a museum, while still supporting that arts organization. And activation opportunities. This is often a fun one. I'll give you an example of when I worked for Wyndham Hotels and Resorts, and we supported Save the Children. So if you book these hotels during this period, $5 will be donated to Save the Children. So those are often fun and interesting ways to help the business, but also bring dollars into your organization. So I think it's really important to and I apologize, no one comes to the house during the pandemic, and our doorbell just rang, so my apologies. It's the virtual hiccups we go through sometimes. So we have here a slide on the difference between corporate foundation and corporate sponsorship. This is a really, really important piece, because foundation, it's important to know who to reach out to. When I was at American Express, I worked in the foundation. However, I had a budget that was on the foundation side and the sponsorship side. So sometimes it's a hybrid model where you'll see both, or sometimes it's 2 separate departments. So in the foundation, you know, it's funded through the corporate foundation. Often there's no expectation of any kind of promotional or marketing return. Sometimes they may want volunteer opportunities, and reporting and follow-up with outcomes is very important, because with the foundation you do have to do that reporting. Where on the corporate side, The gift, again, is likely from the marketing or advertising budgets. Recognition, advertising, value for corporation, naming opportunities, ticket to events. So, for example, when funding the arts at American Express, most of that came up from the sponsorship bucket. So we were able to give tickets to our employees or look for opportunities to do that additional naming and advertising. Or if it was from the foundation side, it was straight just a gift. And with the sponsorship, they may or may not want to engage volunteers. The media impressions, though, are very, very important. When you're funding from a foundation, it is often unlikely you will see your name in any kind of newspapers or articles. But on the sponsorship side, they definitely want to see that recognition.
Oh dear.
Next slide.
Sharing, yep. Let's see. There we go.
There we go. So what are the advantages of raising support from corporations? So once receive, additional support is much more likely in the future. Again, it takes a really long time to build these kinds of partnerships, but once you receive those dollars, you're often in the long haul. Corporations do change their giving priorities from time to time, but they tend to stick with them for a good period of time. So once you've received that first support, it is much more likely in the future. Support from a corporation gives credibility. That kind of leads into the next one. Once you have that credibility, you're often able to leverage those dollars from other supporters. And then it's a great way to help small nonprofits. Sometimes corporations aren't able to fund those small grassroots organizations, but they are able to through in-kind goods and services. So what are some of the current trends we're seeing in corporate funding? First, increased transparency ties back to what I talked about earlier, of companies really having to do good and do the right thing, because consumers are only wanting to purchase from companies that are doing the right thing. So being transparent, it's almost an expectation now. Sustainability, many of you I'm sure are familiar with the UN sustainability goals, and many companies are actually putting them in their annual reports now, saying what they're doing. Some of them are choosing all of them to address, others may be choosing just a handful. But it's been really important from both a transparency standpoint, but also sustainability. And just simply being green, from everything from recycling to if they're actually providing goods and services, how it's packaged, looking at the suppliers, and not only on the basic level of suppliers, but even digging even further to second and third levels of suppliers to make sure people are doing the right thing. More local support. I think companies are realizing that yes, they can have their global programs, but they really need to support the organizations in their backyards. And that's always a great way, which Vivian will talk about later, of looking at those companies that are right in your backyard. And diversity, equity, inclusion. I think, this one's more obvious today than ever. I think companies have started to do the right thing. And they've put in the basic sort of 101 work with having some employee resource groups. So your Black employee network, or your Latino employee network, your LGBTQ disability, and so on. Many of them have, put in some specific goals for their leaders as far as it comes to hiring practices. However, I think we have a long way to go. Companies also often are risk adverse, and I think allowing a space for employees to talk, to address those elephants in the room, that's where we have some work to move the needle. But I am pleased to say that most are recognizing the importance, and there's certainly ways that you, in applying for grants to corporations, can talk about how you can help them increase their diversity and work with their employee groups, which we'll get into a little bit more later. And then more engagement through social media. Companies are starting to feel much more comfortable doing Instagram posts, and especially when it comes to philanthropy, showing we just donated X number of computers today, or we are providing the food bank with this amount of food. I think it's a great way to follow what companies are interested in, and it should help you in building your proposal. And we thought we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about what's happening during the pandemic with corporations. So right now, companies are really responding to immediate needs like food, shelter. Sadly, domestic violence and child abuse is through the roof. So they're really responding with emergency grants, and have been really pleased with how they've sort of let go of some of their restrictions around grants and offering more flexibility. Sadly, though, they've had to, in some industries, whether it's hospitality or restaurant, to furlough or let go of their employees. So there's a lot of shifting and really assessing what kind of support they're going to be able to do moving forward. So I do think in some industries we may see some changes. So just keep an eye on that. But in general, they really are trying to step up to the plate and think about the best way that they can get rid of some of the rules right now and support organizations as much as they can. Also looking at ways that they can engage their employees. Employees want to feel like they can do something, and having their company that they can depend on to help guide them. So whether that is helping to pass out food at a food bank, or maybe assist with some domestic violence calls on a hotline, those opportunities are coming up, and volunteers or companies are engaging their employees to do that kind of volunteer work. Pivoting to stay relevant. Again, they want to show that they're responsive. And then geographic presence changing. We're hearing a lot, like Twitter, I think, has gone to complete stay at home. There are others that are doing a hybrid of both, or even talking about it for the fall, or closing down certain locations because they've reduced their workforce. So again, the geographic presence is often an important piece in deciding on who you submit your proposal to. So it's important to kind of watch that and to see some of the changes that some of these companies are making. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Vivian to talk about identifying the right prospects and building a partnership over time.
Thanks, Cheryl. Hello, everyone. Thank
Vivian,
you. Yes?
Can you wait 1 second? Someone's got a hand raised. I think it's a current.
Oh, sure.
Can you just hang on
Okay.
1 second. Haruka, hang on a second. Haruka, I'm going to unmute you.
Oh, I think she's muted again, maybe.
No, hang on, I admitted in this.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, ask your question.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't. Oops.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Vivian. I'm sorry.
Sure. So thank you all for joining us, and we're glad to give you some distraction from sheltering in place and from all of the other things that are happening in the world right now. Although I will say I was very impressed, because here on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, we had 10,000 protesters yesterday shouting Black Lives Matter, et cetera. And I was really proud of them and of us. So since we're talking about corporate sponsorship, I'm going to tell you my favorite joke about corporate sponsorship. So a board member, a nonprofit board member, is walking on the beach, and she sees a magic lantern partially buried in the sand. So of course she goes over, picks it up, rubs it, and out pops a genie. And the genie says, "I will grant you one wish and one wish only." And so the board member is very excited. She's a very good board member, and she loves her organization. And she says, "Jeannie, what I would really like is $1 million to help my nonprofit through this pandemic and the economic hardships that it's brought." And the genie says, "Your wish is my command. Go to the office on Monday morning and you will find there $1 million waiting for you." So Monday morning comes, And the board member rushes over to the office, of course, wearing her mask. And the employees are milling around, and she's like, what's going on here? And so she tries to get into the office, and she almost literally can't get in because pouring out of the offices and piled high in the kitchen are binder clips, thousands and thousands and thousands of binder clips. So she's irritated, she's perplexed. Of course, she goes right back to the beach, picks up the lantern, rubs it, out pops the genie. She says, Genie, what did you do? You promised me $1 million for my nonprofit. And the genie says, I gave you $1 million in kind. That's my favorite joke about corporate sponsorship. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of raising funds from corporations, which starts with identifying the right prospects and building a partnership over time. So when you're thinking about identifying prospects, what you want to do is you want to start a list. And over time, you want to build that list to 25 or 50 names. And so I think about it as sort of concentric circles, right? So you're going to start with the businesses that are right in your backyard, literally down the street from your physical locations if you have them. And then thinking outward to what are sort of the metropolitan area and regional businesses that are in your area. And then, of course, what corporate headquarters are there or plant facilities. And then finally, of course, you want to think about national or multinational companies outside your community. However, I will say that, board members often ask us, why aren't we raising more money from big corporations, like the ones that they know, Adidas, Nike, Pepsi. And the truth is that most of us will have better luck with companies that are slightly smaller than that Fortune 100 tier, not necessarily tiny mom and pop shops, but companies that are sort of in that huge middle range. So we know that we should be thinking more creatively about which companies to approach. And then, and back to the number of companies on your list. So even the best fundraisers only are going to be successful with 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 proposals. And so if you're really serious about getting corporate funding, you really need to build that list over time. This applies to all major gift fundraising. It applies to individuals and foundations as well, but also to companies. So still in identifying the right prospects, you're going to think about your vendors, the businesses your organization uses regularly, wherever they're headquartered. If your organization has members, think about where those members work. Where do your board members work? Where do your high net worth donors work? Even your not so high net worth donors, where do they work? And this next category is very important. So this is companies that sell products to your primary constituency. So if you are offering an online after-school program to high school students, you probably want to think about companies that make the products that high school students and teenagers love, whether it's Nike sneakers or Hollister jeans, or and so you want to think a little bit creatively about what businesses might sort of intersect with your mission or have activities that touch your programs. So I like to give an example here. It's one of my favorites, and it's actually about American Express, which is where Cheryl used to work. And it's about, so I have a client for a number of years now called Heritage, which is a Greek organization that wanted to start fundraising in the US. And they hired us to establish their presence here, build a board here, and start fundraising here. And of course, American Express, mostly under Cheryl, has a very distinguished history in funding historic preservation. But by the time we got to American Express, they had stopped sort of the Partners in Preservation program that Cheryl ran, and they were still funding Heritage, but they weren't accepting many new proposals from Heritage organizations. However, They also have a leadership development program that is designed for nonprofit leaders. And the core program of this heritage organization is training mostly archaeologists and art historians who work in museums and on archaeological sites, training them to be business leaders so that they can better preserve and promote their properties. And so this is a common, so we managed to get a meeting with the second in command at the company. And when it became clear that there was not much more funding in the heritage area, and this gentleman started talking about the leaders, the director who was with me became quite excited. And what happened over time is that they gave $50,000, and then they gave $100,000 the next year, and $150,000 after that. And this year, this is now 5 or 6 years later, they're giving $100,000 because things aren't so good. But my point is that you just have to think a little creatively about who your prospects might be and how you might fit. So what kinds of research do you want to do once you've identified your prospects? And I should say there are many resources available for researching companies. There are business publications like the Wall Street Journal, Forbes and Fortune, Fast Company. Then there are if the company has a foundation, then you will be able to find out information about that foundation on something called FDO, the Foundation Directory Online, which is now part of an organization called Candid. Don't ask me why. They're called Candid. Then there's also a website called Inside Philanthropy, which is newer and has also a database of foundations. Those two, FDO and Inside Philanthropy, cost some money, but not as much as sort of the proprietary databases like Lexis and Nexus, which really cost a lot of money. So there you are. You've identified some companies, and what sorts of things do you want to know? Well, you certainly want to know what the trends in earnings are for the industry. And so many industries right now are suffering quite a lot. And you definitely want to keep that in mind as you're thinking about your corporate targets. Who are the officers of the corporation? Who makes the grant decisions? So it might be the contact person. It might be someone else at the company. If the company has a foundation, then that foundation probably has a board of directors, and the board of directors would make the decision. If they don't have a foundation, so if they're a little bit smaller, it might be the human resources department. It might be the president's office. So you just, and of course, if it's sponsorship, right, then it's the marketing group that is in charge of the funds, usually, maybe in concert with the foundation, as Cheryl was mentioning. Next one, very important. Do they accept unsolicited proposals, right? Many companies do, and some do not. And so if in fact you're very keen on a company that does not accept unsolicited proposals, you're really going to have to find a way to make a connection with someone at the foundation or people in the marketing department whom you think might be interested in your programs. Is there a geographic focus? So it's, again, this is as Cheryl mentioned, this is sort of a mutating, changing question, right? Because if a company like Twitter is no longer going to have a physical presence anywhere, that may very well affect their giving, but we just don't know yet how. And very important, what is their giving history and what are their guidelines? You know, it used to be that companies this is many years ago now, they sort of gave to whomever sort of came their way. But for the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years at least, companies have been doing what they call strategic philanthropy, which is they are focused on areas that sort of make sense for their business. And they tend to focus on 2 or 3 or 4. And you really have to know what those are to know whether it makes sense for your organization to apply. And again, I agree with Cheryl that if you take one thing from this presentation, it should be that this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. And again, board members will say, "Oh, let's go approach whomever, and we'll get our first grant in like 2 to 3 months." And we know better, right? So if a board member says that to you, you can quote me and Cheryl. Now, in the pandemic, right, that, as Cheryl mentioned, that has changed, at least in the short run. But in general, you have to expect that it will be 12 to 18 months before you get your first gift. And that can be a hard thing to recognize, but it's important to know, particularly as you're doing your fundraising planning. If possible, you should make the initial approach through a mutual connection. LinkedIn is a great tool for this. So use LinkedIn to see how many people you can be connected to who work at that corporation. And for goodness sake, use your Yale connections. They are very good for this. Once you have found your way to the correct corporate contact, you want to start engaging that person or those people in your mission long before they ever make a gift. Invite them to events, invite them to view your programs, take the program to them. In other words, if you work with teenagers, take some teenagers to visit the corporate contact. And make a proposal only after that relationship is established, when you're invited to make it, or if for some reason you are going through a sort of a portal where you're making a proposal for a small amount of money. Even then, try very hard to find someone to talk to at the company. And of course, when you get the gift, you have to thank the donor immediately, and think creatively about how you might thank the donor. Again, so say your program serves grade school kids, have those children write notes, or draw pictures and send those along as thank you gifts. Or if your program works with teenagers, have them make calls. Think about how you would like to be acknowledged if you were making a gift. And regardless of where you are in the cycle, continue to offer opportunities for engagement. And Cheryl will talk in more detail about that in a moment. Cheryl?
Thank you, Vivian. I did notice there was one question in the chat about if they're a national organization but small. I think, should they still focus on local companies or think more nationally? I didn't know if you wanted to answer that before I jump into this engagement.
I'm sorry, please say the question again.
If they are, I'll bring it up, what about a nonprofit that's national but small?
National but small.
So I think you're mentioning that to try to focus on companies in your local area.
Yep.
National
well, if your organization has any physical locations, it may have multiple physical locations. I don't know. Does it? We don't know. Anyway, if it does, then I would look at, try if there are companies around those physical locations, they might be good targets. But if you're national, right, that really opens up kind of a whole other pool of prospects to you, because then, if you can legitimately say that you're national, then a national or international company should be interested in you or might be interested in you. So it maybe is a little harder to narrow the list, but I never heard any fundraisers say, we don't need more prospects. So with that.
Yeah, and it looks like she just mentioned it's an all-volunteer organization in 14 cities. So yeah, maybe looking for opportunities for those volunteers to interact with some of the employees that want to be volunteers and do some joint volunteer opportunities, which fits nicely into this next section.
Yes.
But before I jump into that, I just wanted to add one more thing that Vivian mentioned. Certainly right to engage your contacts prior to submitting that proposal. However, I do want to caution you not to send it to every single person that you know within the organization. This was always a frustrating thing as a corporate funder, to have it to go to the CEO and the president of the foundation and maybe 5 or 6 other people you know who work at the company, because then it just kind of causes confusion. So it's Vivian's spot on that you need to build those relationships, and it may be someone else other than the foundation, and you can talk with them about the company and the model that they use. But then really work with the person in the foundation to submit the proposal and follow the guidelines. So I think that's just, I just wanted to add that piece.
Great, thank you.
Sure. So moving on to the employee engagement and board opportunities. So determine the interests of executives that want to serve. This is really important. And often if you're at like entertainment industry or a company, often their executives are interested in arts organizations. Or if you are at a pharmaceutical company, often the employees or executives are interested in doing something around health. That's not always the case, but often you see that. And it's a much better chance that the company feels comfortable identifying employees to go on those kind of boards that relate to what they do, because then they feel comfortable helping with the give or get. I see often where employees may want to go on board separate from sort of the overall mission of the company. And that can certainly happen, but then when it comes time for the give or get, they kind of expect that employee to kind of do it on their own. But to really get the support of the company to help you with that give or get for the board opportunity, try to have it match up as close as possible to what the company stands for. It's also a great opportunity to support rising stars within an organization. Again, back to some of the HR stuff we talked about earlier. Companies are often looking for great ways to engage their leaders, maybe giving them, maybe they can't promote them at the time, or maybe they can't give them additional dollars or benefits, but this is one thing. We'd like you to represent our company on this board. It can be through the HR department or foundation. Certainly when I was at American Express, I did some board governance work and would actually help kind of be the liaison between the organization and the employees. But in other companies, it may all work through the HR department. This one in particular, I think is important, is ensure adequate board training for employees. So many employees have never been on the board. They have no idea what the expectations or responsibilities are. And before even placing them, make sure that they understand the organization of the board and what their roles will be. You may have a board. Some of you, most of you with the nonprofit organizations, you may have a fundraising board, and it's really all about those dollars. So that's going to look very different than a board that really needs to use the skills and talents of the employees. So making sure they have the time and the commitment is so important in making the right fit. And then I think it's important for corporations to have those ongoing check-ins, maybe have an opportunity for the employees to come together and share best practices. Some companies do that, others don't, but I think it's really, really important. And it's something that you can offer if you have some board governance training yourself, or just a way to, again, interact with the company by offering those additional assets. And it's a great way to build and leverage a partnership. Again, you may not get the dollars at first, but if you have someone, especially if it's a high-level executive, then most likely they'll support maybe your gala, and then over time some of your projects. So in addition to board, there's also other ways that employees can be engaged. So we talked earlier about the skills-based talent of employees. So whether it's finance or HR or legal, it's a great way. And many companies are now running almost these contests where organizations can come in and sort of pitch their projects. Some of them are doing them, over one day. Some of them are doing like a speed dating model where you can pitch what you need and then they match you up with the right employees to help with those various projects. Of course, find traditional volunteer opportunities, whether it's helping, resack your food bank, or maybe it's painting the walls in a school. Those volunteer opportunities are still important, but really find out what the company, what their approach is when it comes to volunteer opportunities. Some of them offer volunteer opportunities throughout the year. Some of them pick one day where all of their employees come together to do something. So not every model is going to work for every company. So, whether we're trying to figure out what the company's priorities are or the volunteer opportunities may be research. It's important to do that. Matching gifts, and both current and retirees. Some companies continue to match gifts of their retirees, and they range. I've worked for companies where they match dollars up to $200. I've worked for other companies where they match dollars up to $8,000. So it, again, really, it's up to you to inquire, do you have a matching gift program? And to even ask up to what amount do you match the gifts for your employees? And do you continue to match for the retirees? We talked a little bit earlier about these employee resource groups when I was talking about the diversity and inclusion. So again, you may have an African American, Asian, LGBTQ, a women's. So if you have specific programs, let's say you're an arts organization and you have a program that's going to feature female poets, perfect opportunity to reach out to a company that you've been trying to build a relationship with to say, look, we're doing this great production where we'll have 10 female poets. I thought your women's group may be interested and would love to offer some tickets. So that's a great way to just sort of start that kind of relationship. Or if you're already being funded by the company, an even better way to continue to build that partnership and stay engaged. I think it's so important to stay engaged with the company, not just during the grant period, or even sometimes you don't hear during the grant period. It's only like in the beginning when you first get the grant, but it's important to continue to stay in touch. Look for opportunities. Did you see us in the paper last week about this certain project? Or we're expanding our space and building a new wing, and just wanted to let you know. So that ongoing cultivation is really great. And then with the employee resource groups too, again, they are looking for ways to increase the diversity and inclusion. And so if there are some things that you can do and offer to their employee resource groups, it's usually very much welcome. And then, of course, the traditional employee giving. And again, do your research, understand what the company is doing. Are they having that one-day employee giving campaign or 1 month employee giving campaign? They're often in the fall, usually in October. That's the typical time, not for everyone, but for most companies, if they have a specific time where they're giving. And then a lot of companies just offer the opportunity for employees to give year-round. And I'll pass it back over to Vivian to talk about creating those winning proposals.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So now you've identified the right companies, you've done your research, and you've been asked to make a proposal. So when I say write to the correct company, what I mean is make sure that you're addressing your proposal to the right person in the right division is it a proposal that's more appropriate for the foundation, or is it a sponsorship proposal? And I will tell you, many companies now, including American Express, use portals for their grant proposals. And so you actually apply online. And please be sure to submit proposals to companies whose guidelines fit your mission. I cannot emphasize this enough. More and more, as I said, companies are really quite specific about the kinds of programs that they will fund. It's K-12 education, or it's hospitals, or they're actually quite specific. And so really, unless you can, as the heritage director did, creatively make your organization fit the guidelines, then please don't submit a proposal. So ensure geographic location is taken into account. So, for example, Walmart gives gifts of $250 to $5,000 to organizations that are within the catchment areas of their local facilities, whether Walmarts or Sam's Clubs. And if you're a small organization near a Walmart, this might be a great opportunity for you. And even though you apply online, the decision maker here is the facilities manager. And you want to be sure that you try to get a meeting with that person, shake their hand, look them in the eye, tell them how great your organization is. And, people love to be flattered about their companies. And just the same as not submitting your proposal to an organization whose mission doesn't fit yours, please don't change your mission to fit the guidelines. This is called mission creep. It can really kind of take organizations off course, and I would definitely suggest that you not do it. And you must be truthful. So proposals are not a great place to be too promotional. This is not advertising copy. And you need to be able to back up any statement you make with data, right? Or with truthful information. And finally, now we shouldn't have to say this, but not only should you spell check your proposal, but you should have at least one other person read it, because we all know times when spell check has not corrected, the funny words have been in the wrong places, and we just end up looking not very put together. So I don't like to say that things should be perfect, but proposals should be perfect. And finally, be prepared to respond to the outcome. So if the company says yes, it's easy, right? You're going to send a thank you note, but you know what? You're going to pick up, if I were you, I would pick up the phone as soon as the letter or money comes in and say, thank you, thank you, thank you. We'll send you an acknowledgement, but I just wanted you to know how excited our staff and clients are. You want to ask what type of acknowledgement. And here it really depends on whether the money came from the foundation or from a marketing department or advertising budget. And if it came from a marketing department, then the type of acknowledgement will be built into the proposal, right? Because the organization, the company will probably make it clear to you how they wanted to be acknowledged. But ask anyway, because maybe there's something that none of you has thought of yet. And regardless of where you are in the cycle of asking and thanking, look for ways to engage the corporate foundation and or sponsor in your program. Again, invite them, so many things are virtual now, but invite them to if you have that program for high school students, see if it's appropriate to ask a corporate sponsor to observe a part of one of the programs, or invite them to come to a part of a board meeting that's not the executive session, and so that they really feel that they're your partners, right? They don't just feel like an ATM, right? An automatic teller machine. So if the answer is no, it's a lot harder. So this has happened to me many times. And, so first I'm disappointed and then I'm irritated. So I wait a few days or a week until I've calmed down. And then I call and ask, why did you not fund us? Sometimes you'll get a really honest answer. Sometimes you won't, but it's always worth trying. And if you can get an honest answer, explore what you could have done differently. You may learn something that will be helpful to you in all of your corporate proposals going forward. And regardless of whether it's yes or no, continue to cultivate the relationship. Fundraisers are very fond of saying that no is just a way station on the way to yes. So that's very, very important. So we want to be sure we have time for some questions. So what did we learn? So we learned that we have to research. Did I say research? Companies and make lists and talk to employees who used to work at companies. And really, the more you know, legitimately and not illegally, legally, the more you know, the more successful you are going to be. And remember, it takes time to build a partnership. It's not going to happen overnight. It's like any relationship in which you are investing yourself and your organization. It will take time. And again, regardless of where you are in the cycle, keep the company informed and engaged, and keep thinking about creative ways, particularly now, right, when things are just so different than they were. I know a lot of organizations now are using video to keep their constituents and donors informed, short videos that they send on a regular basis. And I always say that, if you're in the cycle of a 12-month cycle, and you're sending something to someone every, 6 to 8 weeks, that you should give them something like 3 or 4 times and only ask them for something once every 3 or 4 times. And you cannot give too much information about your program. If you're excited about your program, you want to give good news about it, then it's easy to keep them, or should be easy to keep the company engaged. And look for ways to engage employees, whether as volunteers or as board members. Increasingly, companies are looking to their employees for direction about how and where to give. And please don't give up. Fundraising is not for the faint of heart, but we know you're up to it, and we wish you much luck. So thank you very much. If you wish to find either me or Cheryl after the Q&A or at any time, you can find us here. And now it's time for the Q&A. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to Vivian and Cheryl. Very, very informative. Just to remind everyone, we are recording this program and we will have it edited down for just making sure we catch any glitches or anything, but we'll have it up on our YouTube channel in the coming week. So please, if anyone has questions, you can raise your hand, or you may type it out in the chat or the Q&A boxes. Oh, hang on, somebody's.
Aha, so someone wants me to go back to the emails slide.
Yep.
So I will do that.
A couple of those saying that.
Okay.
I can start the Q&A a little bit. If you could just give a little background, like what percentage of nonprofit fundraising is brought in from corporate donations of the type you're talking about?
So Cheryl, you want to take this one, or?
Well, I mean, certainly, I think it's really important to diversify your funding. Corporations, it tends to be a lower amount. It really depends on the size of the organization and whether they have a big individual constituency. But the corporate tends to be a much lower percentage. percentage. It doesn't mean that it's not possible, but it's one of the reasons why we wanted to do this particular webinar, because we know it is harder to get those dollars. But my advice in general is to keep diversified funding, because you never want to rely on a specific corporation or any specific funder for most of your dollars.
Great. And I would just add, I think if you exclude government funding and just look at the total of foundation, corporate, and individual giving in the United States, corporate funding is somewhere between traditional corporate funding now, somewhere between 5 and 7%. Now that does not take into account the sponsorship dollars, I don't believe. So it's certainly higher than that.
Thank you. Cheryl and Vivian, I don't know if you can see the questions that are coming in chat. Someone had a question about how to approach non-US owned or based firms, if you've had experience with that.
Yeah, certainly. Again, it goes back to the research. I think it's, if you have programs that are based in other countries, looking to see where companies have a presence in those countries, that's going to be the important piece. I'll go back to the Save the Children example I gave earlier. We were looking for opportunities, Save the Children was looking for opportunities to do some work in some of their other countries. And so they worked with me at Wyndham to see where we had a hotel presence. So certainly you can. It can be, you know, a US-based company that has presence in other countries, or if it's a company that's only based in another country. Again, it's about the research and seeing what guidelines say they have. There are sometimes certain rules and restrictions when it comes to international funding, and it's very specific to each country, so you just have to figure out those nuances. But I would say the basic answer is to kind of follow the same guidelines that we've shared for the US.
Great, thank you. The next question has to do with some of the trends and things you mentioned earlier, Cheryl. You talked about some of them maybe lessening some of the restrictions on funding and maybe stepping up for some of the more immediate concerns. There's a general question, does it look like the corporations are cutting back on their sort of sponsorship and other funding, or changing what they fund? How are you seeing that in the kind of long term and trending?
Yeah, I would say right now they definitely are focusing on immediate needs, and unless they've already committed or already in a grant cycle, not really doing a lot of new things outside those immediate needs, which I know we all understand that, but it's still frustrating for those of us who, if you have a mission that sort of falls outside of health or food or some of the other shelter. They are reassessing what they are planning to do in the fall, but where I do think that we'll see a shift that's in the positive direction, I think this pandemic has brought about the inequity that's in this country, in this world, and I think they will be much more thoughtful, not that they haven't been thoughtful before, but just dig a little bit deeper and really looking at the needs from a grassroots level. And I think we've had lessons learned. We've all had lessons learned from, I think some organizations will now start doing a portion of their galas online, or at least offering that opportunity. I think there's some silver linings through this pandemic that I think nonprofits as well as corporations are taking to heart, and one of them is this whole idea of flexibility in their guidelines, that even though, yes, do your research, and they have to have some parameters and framework in what they do, I think companies are realizing to create more equity, there needs to be some flexibility. So I'm hoping to see some of it stay long-term. I know that's a very long answer to the question.
Thank you, it's a complicated issue.
Yeah.
Someone else requested if you could perhaps give some other examples of activities that are good or fun, or that have worked really, been very successful in engaging corporation employees. You mentioned a few about boards, the traditional walk runs, and maybe if you could just come up with a few others if you have.
Well, so I think the this whole area of using the functional expertise of the corporation's employees, whether that's law or accounting or marketing. You know, nonprofits are, most of them are dying for marketing advice. And so I think that's an area where there's a lot of activity. In other words, more and more companies are allowing or encouraging their employees to do that kind of volunteering. So I think that could be a good area to explore. Cheryl, do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, well, one thing that I didn't mention earlier, and this kind of helps with this question as well. So Vivian mentioned that I oversaw the Partners in Preservation program at American Express, and that idea really came out of American Express saying, look, where we don't have as large of a presence with the card, what can we do from a cause-related or fund program that will grow our business in these areas. And historic preservation had always been a key focus area for them. So let's do something that we're known for, but really try to grow our presence. And the important thing there was, if it was going to be a large national program, to find a national partner. So we linked up with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. After many, many different brainstorming sessions with our marketing team, Partners in Preservation was realized. And that was really the program where we chose a city each year, had the trust to help us identify 25 or so sites. And then they were voted upon by the community, and there was a popular vote winner. And then basically the organization that had the popular vote winner was guaranteed their grant. And at one point, I think it was 100,000, another point 250. But all the other organizations that were in the program, we engaged in marketing. We had them do open houses and promoted them. So I think looking, if the company you know has sort of a gap or something that they want to fulfill, and they may have, it may be under a larger umbrella, but helping them think through some smaller, more grassroots ways that you can help them bring their umbrella program alive is great, because these open houses brought so much traffic of people going to see the site and then going online and voting. And it helped everyone from the hot dog vendor on the street to local businesses, the parks. And so Vivian talked a lot about thinking creatively about how you can engage employees or corporations. So look at what their sort of larger initiatives are, and then be sort of creative in helping them think through from more of a grassroots level.
Great, terrific. Thank you both very much. We're at the end of our time. I wanted to thank everyone for joining us and for being part of the YANA community. I hope everyone stays as healthy and safe as you can. If we can do anything to help support you in your work, particularly addressing some of the immediate needs that are coming before us in this country, let us know. We'll continue to be working online and with each one of you one-on-one. Stay safe. We'll have this recording up shortly. If you are a donor, a YANA member, you'll be getting a copy of the slides, assuming Cheryl and Vivian are okay with that. So there's an added incentive to donate and become part of YANA on a higher level. But again, thank you everyone. Stay safe, and we'll see you online at our next program. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.